Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum and good evening to everyone here. My name is Mr. Zabron Ernest, a teacher at Arimuntas Islamic Seminary, Girls Wing. Welcome to the quick tutorial. This tutorial will be talking about bearings and scale drawing. What you have to know from the very introductory part, you have to know what does bearing mean. We say a bearing describes the direction of one object from another. So what is bearing? So we normally say that bearing describes the direction of one object from the other. That is what we call bearing. Now, bearing, in other words, we say bearing is nothing but an angle. So when you are told to find the bearing is nothing but an angle. And this angle is measured from North Pole in clockwise direction. So that is the thing which we'll be doing today. Now, also, what you're supposed to know, like as I said, that bearing is nothing but an angle. So we say bearing is an angle. Bearing is an angle. So when we say calculate the bearing, we mean find the angle. But how do we measure this angle? This angle is measured from the North Pole. This angle is measured from the North Pole. So I'm going to explain what does North Pole mean. So this angle is measured from the north in the sense of clockwise direction. Okay, in the sense of clockwise direction. And what else? A bearing can have any value from 0 to 360 degrees. And it is always written with 3 figures. Now that is where majority of students get confused. What do we mean by saying 3 figures? Okay, assuming that you have already understood what does bearing mean, that bearing is an angle, and suppose that you have calculated that angle, and then you got possibly the angle which you calculated, or the angle which you have measured is, say, 50 degrees. Now, according to the laws of bearing, how do we record this 50? If you record that the bearing, is 50 degrees, this is incorrect because a bearing is written with 3 figures. I repeat my statement. A bearing is always written with 3 figures. So if you have got the answer which is having 2 figures, go ahead starting with a 0 and then write your 50 degrees somewhere like this. By so doing, your bearing is measured correctly or your bearing is recorded correctly. Now let us see some worked examples. What do we basically do when we are asked to find the bearing? How are the questions look like? Now let us quickly go to the questions and see how do they ask questions. Let us start with a very simple question. Here we go. The diagram shows 3 towns. Oh, you can see the diagram here. Can you see this diagram? I think yes. Now this diagram shows 3 towns, A, B, and C. So you have this diagram. On this diagram, there are 3 towns, which are A, B, and C. What are the questions? The questions are, write down the bearing of B. Oh, remember what I said? Bearing, remember what I said? Bearing describes the direction of one object from another. I repeat my sentence. Bearing describes the direction of one object from another. So let us go back to the question. The question says, write down the bearing of B. We are supposed to find the angle. Of B. We are supposed to find the angle of this town from A. Mark my words. The word from is very important. So write down the bearing. In other words, write down the angle of B from A. So what does the word from imply? It means the point containing the word from is the one on which we draw the so-called north direction. So on this point, write down the bearing of B from A. So this is from A. So go ahead onto point A, because they said from A. So go on to point A and then you draw the so-called your north direction, and go ahead labeling that this is the north direction. So you label like that, that is your north, all right? So that is step number one. Where is your reference point? Mark your reference point by using the north direction. So write down the bearing of this point B from A. So at point A is where we draw the north direction. Okay, and then after drawing the north direction at the point of reference, then the next part is to connect point A to point B, is to connect by using a straight line. And we draw a straight line using a ruler. So step number one is to draw the north direction, something which we have done. And step number two is to connect the two points. Now, can you see the angle they're talking about? This is the angle which they are talking about. I repeat myself. The angle which they are talking about is this angle here. And this angle is measured in clockwise direction. Now, how do we measure the angle? How do we measure this angle? This angle is measured in clockwise direction by using a protector. So you take your protector, put it there, and then measure this angle. How do we measure this angle? You take the protector like this, set the center of the protector somewhere here, and then because we need to measure that angle in the sense of clockwise direction, so make sure that you turn around your protector like this. There we go. Your zero mark, the zero mark of the protector, should be somewhere at the North Pole. Can you see that? Okay. So now go ahead reading this angle. Go ahead reading this angle from 0. This is 0. You read the outside numbers. You read these numbers outside. You read these numbers outside the protector. Can you see these numbers? 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, because you are measuring clockwise. So you read the numbers outside the protector, which starts from here, 0, 10, 20, and so on. So put your protector, the center of the protector should be somewhere there, and then measure this angle from the north direction. So the north direction should be reading 0, and then read this angle. How much is this angle? So this angle, according to my protector, will be 0, 10, 20, 30. Keep going until you hit this line. Keep going until you hit this line. So this is 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, but still we have 120, and then this will be somewhere around 125. So can you see that? So that angle is 125. Okay, so you take out your protector and then you write that the angle is 125. Okay, so go ahead writing here that this angle is 125 degrees. So what is the bearing? What is the bearing of point B from A? The bearing is that angle we got as 125. So there you'll be writing that the bearing of B from A, the bearing of B from A is 120 degrees. But remember, my tools which I'm using are for demonstration purpose. So you may be shifting this diagram onto your counter book, and then you get a different scale. So don't worry, try to follow the same measurements. You're gonna get it. You're gonna get hang of it, okay? Otherwise, let me proceed to the next question. The diagram shows 3 towns, A, B, and C. Write down the bearing of B from A. So that question is done. And let me quickly jump to question. This is A. Let me try to go for question B. Okay, so this is question B. Let me try to push down everything so that I can get enough space. I can get enough space like so. Space for B, right? So there we go. We still have the same diagram. Okay, so this is the diagram, and the question is part B. Okay, the question is part B. Write down the bearing from A to C. From A to C. The bearing. Write down the bearing from A to C. What did I say? From A. So go to the point A. From A, go to the point A, draw your north direction. Go to point A, draw your north direction like that. So that is step number 1, because they said from A. So at point A is where you draw the north direction, and then you label that this is your north. This is your north direction. Or you can simply write capital letter N for north. Now they said write down the bearing from A to C. From A to C. So this time you go ahead joining A to C. Can you see that? Go ahead joining A to C. Adjusting your line so that they should look straight and they should look very neat. So there we go. So this is what they're talking about. So number 1, you sketch, and number 2, you go ahead with calculation. Write down the bearing from A to C. Now the bearing is nothing but an angle, and the angle which they're talking about is this angle from north going to this line we have drawn. That is the angle we have to find out. This is the angle which we have to find out. Write down the bearing from A to C, from A, okay? So this is the angle they are talking about. And that angle is measured in the sense of clockwise, right? So there we go. How do we measure that angle? How do we measure this angle? Now, this angle, just be aware that if you have a straight line, listen, if you have a straight line like this, if you have a straight line, and since you are a Form 2 student, you already know that a straight line, all angles that lie on a straight line, if I measure the angle on the straight line, always that angle should always be equal to 180 degrees. So what I'm going to do, you're gonna extend this line, a little bit down so that you can take advantage. That from this point to that point, that is equivalent to 180 degrees. So what you'll be measuring this portion only. You'll be measuring this portion only by using a protractor. Once you come to know that this portion is how many degrees, then you're gonna total, or you're gonna add it to 180, so that now you can get a full bearing. You can get a full bearing from north to the line. So I think you have understood what I've said. So what I'm gonna do is to measure that small portion, because the other portion is purely 180 degrees. So I'm gonna take a protractor and do the same thing. I'm gonna take a protractor and do the same thing, okay? So take your protractor and measure, that small portion. The small portion I'm talking about is this portion over here. The small portion I'm talking about is this portion here. Now, how do we measure this portion? It's easy. You take your protractor, put the center of the protector. Put the center of the protector somewhere here. And then turn around your pair of, turn around your protector that way. And then you'll be measuring that small portion from here, 0, 10, 20, until you hit this line here. See that? All right. Now, how do we measure that? You're going to read the outside numbers, like as I said. This is 0, this is 10, this is 20, this is 30. Can you see the line we have drawn? Let us try to do it. Okay. Set the ruler, set the protector clearly. So there we go. So we'll be reading this line is how much? This line here. Let me try to show you by using this tool here. Can you see the line I'm talking about? This line here. This line here is the line which we'll be reading. Okay? That line. Now, how do we read this line? We read this outside number, 0, 10, 20, 30, until we hit that line. This is 30, 31, 32, 33 degrees. Okay? So 33 degrees. So that portion is only 33 degrees there. So that portion is only 33 degrees, okay? Then, how do we combine the two angles? We add, because the question is saying, write down the bearing from A to C. The bearing from A to C, you do 33 degrees, add it to 180 degrees, okay? When you do that, this is 3, this is 11, this is 2. So the bearing is 213 degrees. That is your answer. That's the answer of bearing, the bearing of point C from A. And the bearing from the bearing of C from A is 213. So you can pause the video and start taking the notes. But otherwise, what I'm gonna write here is that the bearing, so the bearing of C, the bearing of this point C from A is 213 degrees. Okay, that's all. So don't worry, when you transfer this diagram here, let me show you what I mean. When you transfer this diagram, this diagram here on your counter book, don't worry, because of the so-called scaling. So you can transfer this diagram on your counter book. End of the day, you lose the scale of that diagram. Now, because of that, your answers, which you'll be doing practically at home, may slightly differ with my answers, which I'm trying to demonstrate over here. So don't worry. As long as you will be following this, the procedures, the steps, then refer to your answer as being correct. Your answers should not really match with my answers, okay? Because as you transfer the diagram onto your counter book, you may lose some dimensions, okay? So that may happen. So when it happens, you're getting different answers. Don't start shivering, don't start panicking. End of the day, you get bored and frustrated even, and then you lose the focus. So there we go. So we have done A, we have done part A, we have done part A here, we have done part B, we have done part C. Oh no, part C then is what we are heading to. Now what is part C? We still have the diagram, we still have the same diagram, okay? We still have the same diagram, but this time is to find the bearing of which point to which point. I don't know until I go back to the question. Okay, this is the question, okay? This is the question. Now here is the diagram. The question is, write down the bearing of B. Oh, this time is the bearing of this point from C. Remember what I said? From C. So the word from will determine which point will be the point of reference, meaning which point are we going to use to draw the so-called north direction. So write down the bearing of B. Okay, we are supposed to find the bearing of B from C. So at the point where they said from is where we draw the North Pole. The North Pole, you draw there. They said from C, so go ahead drawing that north direction. Okay, so that is step number one. Step number two is now to connect the two places. Step number two is now to connect the 2 points. And the 2 points they're talking about are B and C. So write down the bearing of B from C. Okay, from C. And then the next part will be to connect those points. Can you see that? Cool, yeah? Now, what does bearing mean? Bearing means an angle. And which angle do you think they're talking about? The angle is this angle here, which is measured from the north. This is your north direction. Now, the angle from the north is this angle. So you draw that angle until you hit the line. Until you hit the line, you have drawn. So that angle looks easy for me. So what I'm gonna do is to take a protractor and put the center of the protractor somewhere here, and then read off this line equals to how much angle. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, take my protractor, and then measure that angle. Okay, now I got my protractor in place. Then take that protractor straight away to your construction. Where is your construction? So there we go. This is where you have constructed. Now, how do we measure this angle? This angle is measured by balancing the center, of the protractor somewhere there, and then set the protractor vertically up so that you can have your zero of the outside numbers reading the North Pole, Can you see that? Can you see my zero? Look at the center of the protractor. The center of the protractor should be at that point, and then the zero mark. Can you see the zero of the outside numbers? Can you see these numbers? Can you see those numbers? Those are the numbers which we use when reading or when measuring the angle in the sense of clockwise. But when you read these numbers here, when you read those numbers, these numbers are used when you are measuring the angle anti-clockwise. But we don't need those numbers because you're measuring the angle in the sense of clockwise, direction, and these are the numbers which we'll be reading. Now we read until where? We read from 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, until the line CB. Let me show you the line. This is the line I'm talking about. Can you see that line? That's the line I'm talking about. Okay, so we're gonna read the numbers from 0, 10, 20, 20, so 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, until the line itself. Can you see that line? According to my drawing, this line is a little bit, is it a little bit in front of 8? Yes. According to my tools I have, this line CB is in front of 8 by 1 unit. So that is somewhere around 81. So that is 81. So what is the answer? So take out your protractor and then write 81. Okay, now when you write 81, when you write the bearing, of course, the angle, if you write the angle is 81, this will be incorrect. Remember what I said? Bearing uses 3 figures, 3 digits. So if you have 2 digits, how do we make them 3 figures? Simply write 0 at the starting, and then you put your measurement like that. So the bearing is 0, 81 degrees. Okay, so what is the bearing of point B from C? So here you're gonna write the bearing, the bearing of B from C is 0.81 degrees. Okay, so don't be surprised when you are getting different answers, like the way how I said before, is because as you transfer the diagram onto your counter book, you can mess up some you can, like, mix up the so-called scale. But otherwise, this is for demonstration purpose. So you are good to go for practice. Okay. So that part is done. Let's see the next question. The next question is, I have like few slides. Oh, wow. I have so many slides, but it's nothing. Let me try to push and see how far I'm gonna go. Okay, so here we go. We are given this question here. Can you see the screen? Yes. We are given this question, but this question is that you are given the diagram already, and you are given with angles already. So what are the questions? Let us see. For each of these diagrams, how many diagrams are there? How many diagrams are there? We have 1, 2, 3 diagrams. Okay, for each of these diagrams, write down the bearing of P from Q. For each of these diagrams, you are supposed to do the bearing of P from Q, okay? So let me talk about one diagram after the other and try to show you how do we find the bearing of P from Q, okay? So there we go. Let me start with the first diagram. No, that is not the first diagram. Where is the first diagram? I think here I have B. Okay. Do I have A? Nope. Okay. Let me try to copy that and put it for each of these diagrams. So there we go. And then put it on a separate page. Oh, wow. Yes. So here we go. What is this? No, I'm not looking for this. I'm looking for this question. Okay. This question, put it on a separate page. Oh, this time I'm gonna manage. Let's see. Wow, bam. So we have this question. It's the question which I want to talk about. Okay. All right. So there we go. For each of these diagrams, write down the bearing of P. Write down the bearing of P. Can you see this? Write down the bearing of P. Where is P? This is P. The bearing of P from Q. Oh, from Q. From Q. At point Q is where we draw the North Pole. So the North Pole is already done for us. Okay. But I'm trying to show you. So write down the bearing of P from Q. So we on Q you have to draw the North Pole. It's already done. That is step number 1. Step number 2 is to connect P to Q, is to connect P to Q. And also it is done for you. It's already connected. Okay. Now which angle? Write down the bearing of P. The bearing of this P from Q is nothing but this angle, which is measured in the sense of clockwise. And that angle, go ahead writing 244 because it's already given for you. So the bearing, so you write here, the bearing of P from Q is 244 degrees. That is super. This is pretty easy question because everything is given for us. Okay, so that diagram ends there. Let's go to the next question. That was A. Let's go to part. That was A. Let us see if we have got B. Okay, do we have part B? Yes, there we go. Again, same question. Write down the bearing of P. Write down the bearing. Write down the bearing of P. Write down the bearing of P from Q. Oh, okay, from Q. This is point Q. So at the point where they said from is where we use a ruler and draw the north direction. So that is done for us, right? And then connect P to Q. Connect P to Q. Connect P using a ruler. Connect P to Q. Now, bearing is nothing but the angle measured from this north. You measure from this north to the line connecting P and Q. So that angle is already here. So what do you write? The bearing is 348 degrees. So this question looks to be pretty easy. And then you write the bearing of P from Q is 348. So here you're gonna write the bearing of P from Q is this one here, 348. Okay. All right. So arrange your work properly. This I'm just doing for demonstration purpose. You can write neatly, and then you're good to go. So this is part B. Let me see if I have part C. Question part C. So there we go. Here we are. Again, write down the bearing of P from Q. Okay. So we're supposed to write the bearing of P from where? From Q. Okay, from Q. So you go ahead on point Q and then draw the north direction like so, and it's done for you. So then the next step after drawing the north pole on Q, and then connect P to Q. Connect P using a straight line. Connect P. Now the bearing is nothing but this angle. The bearing is nothing but that angle from the north direction, which is here. So the bearing, you just write here, the bearing of P from Q is 204 degrees. This question was pretty easy. Let me see if I have got a difficult question. Then after this slide, we go ahead to this question. Nope. Before that, I guess I have another part. Do I have another question? I guess yes. But all right, here we go. For each of these diagrams, now this is Loman 1, this is Loman 2, work out the bearing of Q from P. Okay, so let me try to separate this, copy that, sorry, let me try to put each question, I try to put each question on a separate page, okay, copy that. Then I want to have each question on a separate slide, right? So there we go. That will be B, and then let me look for C. Okay, this is your C. So the same question, but this time I'm gonna go for C. Okay, copy that. Then push it somewhere there. Yes. Right, so we have everything in place there. What is this happening? Nothing. Okay, we're gonna do this question C on a separate page. All right, there we go. Now let me take you back to where we ended. Okay, this is the question. For each of these diagrams, Loman 2. Why Loman 2? It's because we had Loman 1 question somewhere here. We had this question here. Can you see this? For each of these diagrams, Loman 1, write down the bearing of P from Q. So we have answered all this, and these were the solutions. We had A here. Can you see that? We had Loman 1A there. We had B. We had C. Okay, that's C. Now let us go to another question, which is this one here. Not that, of course. It is this question here. There we go. Loman 2. For each of these diagrams, Loman 2, work out the bearings of Q. The bearing of Q from P. So to make it nice, to make it look nice, so what we're gonna do is separate each diagram on its corresponding page. All right. So let me start with A. This is the diagram A. Okay. For each of these diagrams, work out the bearing of Q. Work out the bearing of Q from P. All right. Work out the bearing. Work out the bearing of Q from P. Remember what I said? From P. So on point P is where you draw the north direction. Is where you draw the north direction. How did I know? Use the word from. The word from will determine whether to, I should repeat that. The word from will determine which point will be used as our reference, meaning on which point do we draw the north direction. So the word from will determine which point to use so that we can draw our north direction. So they said from P, so you go on to point P, you go straight to point P. So we go straight to point P, okay, from P. So this is your point P, this is point P, and then you draw your north direction. Unfortunately, this is done for you. Can you see that? It is done for you. The north direction is already there. Okay. Now, what is the bearing? What is the bearing what is the bearing of Q from P? So on point P is where you draw the north direction and then you connect Q to P. Connect Q to P is already done. Can you see that Q to P is already connected? This is already done for you. Now, which angle do you think they're talking about? This time they are talking about this angle here. The angle, the bearing is measured from the north direction, which is this one, to the line we have drawn. Okay. Now, how do we do that? We use calculations. We don't have to measure. We use calculations. This is 248 degrees. How do we take use of that? How do we take use of that? Can you see that? Can you see that when I was teaching you angles, I told you that if this line is heading up and also this line is heading up, okay? What happens if this line goes a little bit down and it looks like so? Can you see that if you extend this line a little bit down, can you see that if you extend this line a little bit down, can you see that there is something we call it Z? Can you see that there is something we call Z? Z means this angle, if this angle is 20 degrees, even that angle will be 20 degrees. So take use of that. Take use of that. So what I'm gonna do is to use the same concept. I know that I'm supposed to find the value of this angle. How do we take advantage of this angle? So what I'm gonna do, let me try to extend the line out. Let me try to extend the line going down, this line here. Let me try to extend it going down, okay? Okay, so this line here, if you remember what I said, this line here is 200 and this line here is 180 degrees. Okay, so can we find this angle? The answer is yes, we can find this angle. How? We have 244 degrees. Might have forgotten. 244 is here. Let me show you. This is 244. Okay, can you see that? That is 244. So let me try to extend the line again. You see the line which I'm talking about? This is the line which I'm talking about. If you extend this line a little bit down, can you see that this part here is 108? So can we get this portion? The answer is yes, we can get that portion. How? Take 244 minus 180 degrees. If you subtract that, you're gonna have 4 there. This is 14 minus 8, that is 6. And this is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Okay, so this is 64. This portion here is 64 degrees. Okay, now, how do we use this 64? Remember what I said? If you have a line like this, let me try to highlight on the diagram itself what it means. Okay, Let me try to change color and make it red. And this one here, make it a little bit heavy. Okay, so this line here, and if you go that direction, and then if you go down there, can you see something like that? Now, if you can see that, something like that, if this is 64, if this is 64, automatically even the angle we're looking for will be 64 degrees. This is what we call alternate angles. Now, how do you write the answer? Remember the answer we have got? The answer we have got is having two numbers, is having two figures. How do we make it three figures? You're gonna write 64 like that, but make sure that you begin with a 0. And this becomes your bearing. So the bearing of Q from P is 64. So the bearing of Q from P is 64. Or in short, we say 64 degrees. Okay, so I hope you have understood. Then for part B, I'm gonna go quickly for part B. So quick. Okay, this is part B. Same question. Same question for each of these diagrams. Okay, we have this diagram in place. Work out the bearing. Work out the bearing of Q from P. Work out the bearing. Work out the bearing of Q. Work out the bearing of Q from P. What did I say? If they say work out the bearing of Q, the bearing of Q, that means this letter here, the bearing of Q. Can you see this? The bearing of Q from P. So on point P, you draw the north direction, which is already done. The north direction is already done for you, so you don't have to do that. And then the next step will be to connect the two places. Which two places? Q and P. Connect them using a straight line. Is already done for you. So which angle do you think they're asking for? The angle they are asking for is this angle here. This is the angle the question is asking for. Now, how do we do that? Simple. What we're gonna do is try to remember the so-called alternate angles, the so-called alternate angles. How do we mean by saying alternate angles? This is what we mean. Going this way down, going like so, and then move a little bit down like that. Can you see? Can you see that? If I know this angle, if I know this angle here, this angle will definitely be equal, to that angle. And once we know that, then we are done. Boom. How do we find this? How do we find this angle? How do we find this angle? It's easy. Remember what I said? You remember what I said? I said that, and I repeat myself. I said that this line here going down, can you see that line? That line there going down is your 180 degrees, 180 degrees. Now, how do we get the other portion? You're gonna take 348 degrees, you minus with 108 degrees. The answer you get will be this portion here. So this is 8, and then 14 minus 8, this will be also 68, okay? And then 2 minus 1 will be 168. So that's 8, that's 14, this will be 2, 3, okay? That means, let me try to show you what I mean. How did I get 348? The 348 is this angle. So once we do that, can you see that that part is 108, the other part will be 168, okay? So this part here is 168. Now, since this, remember what I said? Let me remove this. Let me remove this line. Check out that line. Put this line there, okay? Remember what we have agreed? We have agreed that if this angle is 168, even this angle here will be 168. That is the concept of alternate angles. So what is your answer? Work out the bearing of Q, work out the bearing of Q from P. So here we write the bearing of Q, the bearing of Q from P, the bearing of Q from P we got is 3 figures already, is 168 degrees. Don't put another 0 there because these are already 3 figures, and that is how a bearing is kept. So the bearing is written with 3 figures. So a bearing is a 3-figure number. So bearing is a 3 figures number. So we got the 3 figures. So we are good to go to the next question. So you can pause this video and try to get the notes. Okay, so there we go. Let me see if I can wind up with the last question. So we have the last question. The last question is here. Okay, the last question is here. Work out the bearing of Q from P. Okay. You can pause the video, try your understanding, try what you have, like what you have understood, and then put whatever you have understood, put them in practice, and then you're good to go. Otherwise, let me help you. For each of these diagrams, work out the bearing of Q from P. So from P. At point P is where we draw the north direction, and then connect the 2 places, which is done for you. And then, which angle are they talking about? The angle they are talking about is from the north to that line connecting the 2 places. So this tiny angle, this small angle is what they are looking for. How do we use that? How do we use the concept? Remember the concept I've given you? Extend this line going down so that you can get something we call Z form. Okay, let me show you the Z. Let me show you the Z. Let me try to show clearly the Z. So the Z I'm talking about will be running from here, going this way, going down there. Can you see? So my task is to find this angle. My task is to find this angle. Once I know this angle here, look. This angle here equals to that angle. So in short, this angle over here will be equal to that angle. How do we calculate this angle? How do we calculate this angle? We take that angle which you see there, you take 180 minus, sorry, you're gonna do 204 degrees, you minus with 180, you minus that, this will be 4, that will be 10 minus 8, this will be 2, and here remains 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. So this portion, let me take my lines back. Okay, so my line is back there. So what I gonna do is this portion here, we got is 24 degrees. Now this portion equals to this portion. Okay, so the bearing is 24 degrees. But how do we write that? The bearing is the bearing of P, the bearing of Q, sorry, from P is, don't write 24 degrees like that, put a 0 because bearing is a 3-digit number. Okay, so let us stop here. Until next time, bye bye. Zebron here. Stay safe. Bye.